Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you follow us. Very warm welcome from my side. My name is Sandra Carvalho and I'm in charge of the Market Intelligence and Competitiveness Department at the World Tourism Organization. It's a pleasure to welcome you all, those following us on YouTube, but also joining us through Zoom to the first 2021 UNWTO Insights Series. This is a very special one. We have a fantastic partner with us today. UNWTO and Google have started working closer together as the crisis unfortunately started to impact on our sector, making sure that through data, insights, knowledge, education, and also technology, we can actually help all of you and our sector to recover in the best way possible. Just a few housekeeping remarks for all of you. Please, we will have hopefully a very interactive session. We count on you to make it a win-win for everyone as much engaged as possible. So for those following us on YouTube, please do your questions whenever you feel in the chat. And also for those on Zoom, the question and answer area. We will be following that and happy to bring your questions and comments to the discussion. With that said, I'm very happy to have with me today two fantastic partners of UNWTO and Google. So without any further ado, I'll just introduce them very briefly before we start our sessions. Today with us is Eva, and I'm going to try to say her surname properly, Schleckler. And Eva is a global destination marketing partner at Google. And we also have with us Songul Sergit, which probably her surname doesn't look like anything like this. And for those who are with us from Turkey, will say this is not the way you say it. But thank you very much, Eva and Songul, for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us. So without any further ado, the webinar today is divided in two blocks. The first block, we will share some of the data that we have seen on the impact of the sector and what can we expect moving forward, both from the UNWTO assessment, but very thrilling to see what are really consumers worried about and looking for online through Google searches. The second block will be dedicated to sharing with all of you two important tools that we think will be very useful for you to know more about and use, which are the UNWTO Recovery Tracker and the Google Destinations Insight tool. So stay tuned. I'm sure that you will have a lot of questions and we're very happy to have you again. I'm just seeing some comments on the chat: Vilnius, Italy, Bhutan, France, Belgium. Pleasure to have you all with us today. So without any further ado, I will start sharing with you the latest UNWTO assessment on how COVID-19 has impacted on tourism. It's already commonplace to say that we obviously lived through an unprecedented year in history for society, obviously, but also for our sector. And what we have seen is really a decline that we had never seen before in history. And I think this will apply in many, many industries within tourism itself. So if we go back a little bit into where we were before the crisis hit us, we had reached in 2019 an historical level of international tourism with 1.5 billion international tourists crossing borders. We were one of the main sources of jobs, mainly among women, who make 54% of the workforce, and we were the third largest export category. Many people often don't see tourism in that scope, but we are one of the main pillars of the economies of countries in terms of their balance of payments. And we were having a growth uninterrupted for many years, a very strong growth. Then we all know what happened. We had a timeline of closures that started very early in Asia in January and through March actually expanded throughout the world. For the first time in history, we saw planes grounded all around the world, hotels closing. And it is also the first time that a crisis hits so deeply and so widely, because we had seen crises before in specific regions of the world, but never something that has actually impacted all the world around. So what has that translated to in terms of volumes? According to the UNWTO latest impact assessment, we lost around 74% of international tourist arrivals in 2020. Most impacted region has been Asia and the Pacific with minus 84%, which is natural considering two important factors. One, Asia suffered the impact of the crisis earlier, but also the destinations in Asia are actually among the ones which still today are more closed in terms of border restrictions. So we have seen that Asia in that sense has been more affected. Europe a little bit less at minus 70%, because we did see during the summer season in the Northern Hemisphere that little by little Europe borders started to open, and considering that a lot of the traffic in Europe comes from Europe itself, there was a revival during those summer months. If we look into the past and to see the true magnitude of what we're talking about, we must consider that during the 2009 global economic crisis, international tourist arrivals declined by 4%. So if you see that 4% compared to 74% in 2020, we really grasp the magnitude of what the sector is dealing with at this moment. So if we continue into looking into where we were and where we are, currently our level of international tourist arrivals in 2020 has taken us back around 30 years. We are at the levels that we had in the early 90s. So the recovery of those levels is probably gradual, and this is something that we'll see next, but also very diverse among the regions as they evolve in the different factors that impact on recovery. So according to our estimates, we have lost 11 times what we have lost during 2009, and not only in terms of volume, but obviously in terms of income. We have lost 1.3 trillion in exports around the world, and we have lost 2 trillion in terms of the impact that tourism has on global GDP. Useless to say that one of the most challenging situations is obviously the impact on jobs. UNWTO estimates that around 100 to 120 million jobs directly in the tourism sector, and this does not consider all the other sectors that depend and feed into tourism, have been impacted. So what can we expect looking ahead in terms of the months to come? This is probably one of the most difficult moments to do any forecasts, and the challenging of advancing any specific forecast data has been proven very wrong in the past months. So it's really one of the challenging moments in terms of looking ahead that we have faced. So at UNWTO, our scenarios point to three possible situations. One, that we do see some recovery towards the mid of 2021. And that would mean that it would take us still around 2.5 years to actually reach the levels that we had before the pandemic. Another scenario that we will see recovery going forward mostly in 2022, and that will take us further down the line. And a third, less positive scenario where we would need at least 4 years to actually go back to the levels that we saw prior to the pandemic. So what do our experts think about when we will back? And I think it's interesting because looking at the different industries in hospitality, in airlines, those estimates go very much in line. We have asked the panel of experts that we've been surveying since 2003, when do they expect international tourism to recover to pre-pandemic levels? And most of them do indicate that 2023 and 2024. before. So the challenges ahead are enormous. We need to keep the survival of the sector, but we also need to take this opportunity to transition into a better sector in terms of sustainability and in terms of education and technological change that has been so much accelerated by the COVID crisis. When we also asked our experts what obviously were the main limitations to that recovery, travel restrictions as a consequence of the slow virus containment is really on top. So one of the major objectives as UNWTO is really to work towards a global framework to advance the issue of coordination in terms of travel restrictions, because this will be one of the important triggers together, obviously, with the advances on the vaccine. So what has changed in terms of consumer behavior? Just as a summary, a lot of you have seen different trends in your countries, in your industries. Obviously, closer destinations were a priority due to the limitations in mobility. Domestic tourism has gained an amazing proeminence, which is also good because it is an important part of the tourism sector that often is not given enough importance. We have seen a very high interest on nature, rural tourism, and road trips. And we've seen new concerns in terms of health and security, but also on cancellation policies. This is a very important point. Consumers are more and more interested in knowing exactly what cancellation policies apply to their travel, due to the fact that we are living a very fickle situation in terms of travel restrictions. That, as a consequence, has also brought less minutes. Most of the booking windows have shortened relatively to the years before. And another important point, if we look at recovery, is that younger travelers have shown higher resilience and capacity and interest in recovering travel. We've also seen, and hopefully it will be a tendency that will stay, that sustainability, authenticity, and the value of local food has increased. So we do see this as a huge opportunity to transition into a more sustainable sector. So with that said, that was from my side, the overall picture of where we are in terms of impact of COVID on international tourism and what we can expect in the coming immediate future. With that said, it's been a pleasure, as I said, to partner with Google in advancing insights for the industry. And I'd like now to give the floor to Eva, who will share with us what are really consumers looking into when they Google. I always say that surveys are fantastic, but there's nothing like looking into the Google searches to really understand the behavior of travelers in this very challenging moment. So Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you all for joining. I'm very, very impressed by the list of countries that appeared in the chat. I wish we could be doing this in person in any of your countries, but I guess that will have to wait. And until now, we can still exchange knowledge this way. So we're very grateful for that. My name is Eva. I work at the Global Tourism Acceleration Center at Google. We support the tourism industry by working with DMOs and industry bodies. We basically help leverage Google's platforms, insights, tools, in order for DMOs and other tourism entities to increase their digital capabilities, to get better insights and to shape their overall digital strategies. So I'll take you today through two things, basically. We'll look at the state of travel in 2020, and here I'll be sharing some of the data from Google Search and YouTube video. And we'll also be looking into whether there are any recovery signals and basically what to watch out for in the coming weeks and months. And before sharing the 2020 data, I wanted to start off with the quote and to say that I honestly hope that this is true in our case, and that after the year that we've had and after what we're seeing now, we can only hope that the darkest days are ahead of us and that we'll have some brighter days to come. Having said that, it's been a very tough year. Now, you probably all know from your own experience that when you travel, Google search is one of the places where you end up researching your trip at some point, whether you're looking to learn more about your destination or to check out the hotel reviews or compare prices. Google is the go-to place for trip planning and for dreaming about travel. And so for us, it's a massive category of searches that's been on the rise for forever since we've been keeping track of things. And so last year, for the first time, we saw a decline in travel queries. So more than 15% less versus the year before. And this decline was spread across all the travel subcategories. So everyone suffered from accommodation, air travel, vacation packages. But some did suffer less than others, namely luxury travel or specialty travel, which I think goes to show that even in a catastrophic year like the one that we've just had, there are still niches that do better than others. This is also an interesting piece of information, which isn't Google data, but I think it illustrates to what extent the travel and tourism industry was hit versus others. So travel and tourism websites lost close to 40% of their traffic globally last year, whereas categories such as education and e-commerce, not surprisingly, actually benefited from the situation. One thing that people are usually interested in is what is it that people Google? What is it that they search for when we talk about travel? So that top question around travel was so fundamentally different in 2019 than in 2020. So in 2019, people were interested in becoming travel agents, which I think tells you how much faith they had in the industry. And then in 2020, top of mind for everyone, and that's still the case, when can we travel again? Other fun facts or things that are good to know, which I think, again, echo what Sandra has been talking about, is that search terms such as travel near me or nearby or road trips were also on the rise, indicating that despite the situation, people were looking for ways to get out of the house. And in fact, if we look at the evolution of the questions and what people have been looking to find out from Google, they were different throughout the year, reflecting how the pandemic moved, reflecting travel restrictions, reflecting the rise in the number of cases. And obviously, this is all global data, and this would be slightly different for each market. What I think is important to say here is that travel is an industry that typically has a very well-established cycle, right? And we all know what happens in our destination in March, in August, in November. Not so last year and probably not this year. So keeping your fingers on the pulse and basically understanding what's top of mind for travelers in any given moment is critical. And thankfully, we have the tools to do that now. Unlike Google search, YouTube video actually saw a surge, and not just YouTube, video in general. People were spending more time at home. Video was very popular. So even the travel-related content saw significant growth on YouTube last year, and all of the top travel channels maintained active presence, despite the fact that they weren't traveling as much, but they were creative in ways in which they reached out to their audiences. It isn't just travel though, it's many other video categories as well. Due to pandemic, due to lockdowns and social distancing, people were turning to YouTube and to video for many different things, for coping and for support with the newly created circumstances. So they were using YouTube for anything from how do I homeschool my children to how do I be more productive working from home to how do I cook a good meal or how do I get rid of that anxiety. And the reason I'm mentioning this again is because I think it's an excellent opportunity for many travel brands and destinations in particular to engage with audiences in an entirely new context, in a context that's relevant to them. So if you would normally be present only in a travel related context, or if your content would normally appear only on travel blogs or travel channels or travel magazines, think about how you can engage on topics that are relevant to people now. If you're a food destination, help people cook at home. If you're a health or wellness destination, help people cope with stress. Those positive brand associations that are created in such circumstances will live long enough to help once travel is back. The other thing that's expectedly there, staycations became a big thing. There was a surge in searches for staycations, but also consumer surveys show that people are more likely to travel domestically than internationally in the coming months. And while we might have stopped traveling, or the way we travel changed dramatically last year, what we see in search is that people never really stopped dreaming of travel. And they were constantly looking for ways to experience travel and get energized by looking at travel content. And I think this very much echoes what Sandra was talking about earlier. Remote places and places that are closer to nature became increasingly popular. A lot of the destinations that were always in the top 10 or top 20 lost some of their appeal, whereas some other destinations made it to the list. The other thing, and again, this is a big area of opportunity for anyone working in the sector. Virtual ways to travel have become incredibly popular. So anything from virtual tours to live zoos to travel blogs, anything that enables people to relive that experience from home. And of course, domestic tourism, also ways for families to spend some time together. Those were all very popular last year. Now, into the recovery signals and whether there are any. As you know, you still can't travel freely to most places in the world. There are some restrictions in place pretty much everywhere. And additionally, these things keep changing. And there's a lot of instability there, which in turn makes travelers reluctant to travel. It makes them insecure about booking. And we continue to see, and this was the case last year as well, we continue to see that there are a lot of theories around what people can and cannot do, right? So people are trying to make sense of all these government restrictions. They're trying to make sense of the quarantine rules. They're trying to make sure that they're safe when they travel. And this is hugely important because they're overwhelmed with information from different sources. So it is critical, especially for DMOs, but also other organizations with a similar role, to make sure that users can find accurate and up-to-date information. I would encourage you after this session to go and Google your destination and try to look at it from a traveler's perspective, and try to see what comes up if you Google your country and let's say travel restrictions, or can I travel to XYZ? Are you happy with what you see there? Is it accurate? Is it how you like your country to be represented? If not, then there are things that should be done on this front. As a result of this instability and constant changes, the global travel queries at the beginning of this year and end of last year are still much lower than the year before. So the overall volume of people looking to travel is still lower, and we're not seeing a strong sign of recovery there. Some destinations did manage to attract travelers, mainly destinations that were open and less restricted during the past 2 months, like the Maldives and the UAE, where the interest is strong. And actually, there are some destinations that manage to even grow in interest month over month at the beginning of this year compared to Q3, Q4 actually of last year. There might be different reasons behind each of those destinations. I think the point here, and when you're looking at your own destination, this data obviously is available for all countries. I think trying to do an exercise where you try to correlate some of this data with other things that were happening, whether they're communication activities or travel restrictions or a certain pandemic movement, it's a good indicator to have of how much people are interested or searching for your destination. Now, the area that's definitely growing and that needs to be managed from a communication perspective as well is the relationship between vaccine and travel. And you can see with this huge spike recently that started at the end of December is that people are trying to figure out all the rumors and the vaccine passport and do I need to get vaccinated to travel? So again, this is room for DMOs and other major stakeholders in the industry to make sure that accurate and up-to-date information is provided. There's also a lot of interest in vaccine tourism, as controversial as it may be. Again, that's why it's important to manage this topic rather than to let it flow freely. This slide, again, isn't from Google, but I thought it'd be interesting to share because expectedly it shows that the biggest potential or intent to travel is among countries with the highest vaccination rate, which I think is understandable. So hopefully, as the vaccine pace accelerates, we'll be seeing more people who are willing to travel. I won't go into recovery scenarios. Sandra talked about that. We are also quite reluctant to forecast exact recovery dates, especially since the recovery is very likely to be uneven and bumpy and have some back and forth there. But most stakeholders through various surveys agree that some level of recovery will start to happen later this year. Regardless of when the recovery happens, one thing is certain, and that's that the future of travel and travel sales and how people look for travel is digital. So being digitally savvy is critical basically for any stakeholder. And with the pandemic, a lot of the user habits have been changed. People have turned to digital channels for a lot of things that they used to do offline previously. So that's one thing that we can claim with certainty. So the building digital capabilities of organizations will be critical. In the more immediate future, 3 things to look out for. Again, this is global data. Numbers may vary slightly by country, but we're seeing that people are interested in longer stays, which makes sense if they're traveling and going through all the hassle to travel in these circumstances. They might as well stay longer. We're looking at a shortened look ahead window, so people are reluctant to book travel 2 or 3 months in advance when they don't know how the situation will evolve. And of course, there's a lot more interest in local travel. Having said all this, I guess the main takeaway would be everything that you saw here, everything that happened might not be the case tomorrow. It's a very volatile situation. I think it's critical for any organization to be on top of insights, on top of opportunities by leveraging primarily digital tools and digital sources, and basically by challenging how we do business. With that, I'll leave you with Sandra and Songul, who will be sharing some of those tools and ways to stay up to date. Thank you very much for joining. I'll be happy to take any questions as well, or as many as we can take.
Thank you very much, Eva. That was very insightful, and I probably just take the risk of summarizing a few takeaways because I think they were very actionable and very practical, and I'd like to highlight them. First of all, I think very important the issue of keywords that you just mentioned, nearby, near me. I think for the ones who are with us, it's a very important insight into your search engine optimization, into your marketing language. Use those words because this is what people are looking for. The second one is invest on YouTube because as Eva showed, definitely YouTube, and we'll go to that in a minute. YouTube is raising in interest. Um, the third point is a very important point that Eva stressed, to link your brand and your services with trendy topics right now. And those trendy topics are major well-being, cooking, study and learning. So I'm sure that each of you in your destination and in your company have something that can be fit into this scope. Um, and the last point is information, clear information to consumers on travel restrictions, which unfortunately are very confusing and very fast pacing, changing these days. So I would like just to thank Eva and summarize a little bit. That said, we do have a couple of questions before we go into our second block, and I'll bring them in. The first one, maybe Eva, you can help us on that, is how to engage the audience with videos on YouTube, how to make the most of YouTube.
Oh wow, that's a short question that requires a long answer. But to try to answer it in a couple of words, I think know your audience is the first step. Know whom you're talking to. Know what they're interested in. What are their pain points? What are their passion points? And try to create content around that. So rather than being brand first, and here's what we have to offer, try to think what it is that they're interested in knowing and seeing. So that's a good starting point. And also learn on the go. I think my advice to anyone working with content now, and especially YouTube, would be try, test, iterate. We're way past times when we did those monumental brand pieces and stuck to them for years. Digital platforms enable you to see what works and where you're getting the most traction. So try to learn and be open for the things that you find out along the way.
Thank you, Eva. I think that's a very important point. Flexibility and agility in these days are key features of response. Also, another question that's coming is vaccination passports appearing in search terms? And I think Eva showed that in her presentation, but if you want to comment.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And it's not just the vaccine, it's the relationship between vaccine and travel. So we saw earlier last year, people were interested in vaccine in general, like how long does it take to develop one, side effects, things like that. But now people are specifically interested in the relationship between vaccine and travel. So it's a huge area of interest for the industry.
Thank you so much. There was also a question in the chat about how do we support the survival of the sector in these challenging times. And I would say from the side of UNWTO, we are working, I'd say, in three pillars. One of them is to work with governments to advance the harmonization and a common framework for restarting safely international mobility. That would definitely be one of the key elements. And in that sense, it's very much about agreeing on specific common criteria of risk assessment and the measures that should go with that risk assessment within the UN system. UNWTO is working with WHO, also with ICAO is responsible for air travel. And the challenge is obviously to find a common ground of assessment and of applicable measures. But I think there is a growing awareness of that need and also several processes ongoing. So I think we are slowly but surely moving ahead. The second one is to support the sector in terms of jobs and incentive packages. Since the beginning, we have made a strong call to governments to make sure that the tourism sector is part of the recovery packages, because it's been definitely the most affected sector in terms of the economy, but also to have national schemes to support job retention. And many countries have actually stepped up very much the economic and financial support to companies and to jobs. And the third one is through skills. We are in the moment of having a transition which was already happening, and we are actually accelerating that transition. So we need to prepare the job force to be ready, hopefully soon when we recover, to be ready in terms of technology, as Eva mentioned, and we are doing several activities in terms of training, some of them with Google, to actually grow the technological capacity of our destinations, but also the small businesses, to make sure that we are ready to strongly restart. So with that said, I think I've covered the questions that were mostly shared on the chat, both from our YouTube viewers and our Zoom participants. I'd like to stress that the presentations will be available on UNWTO website. And both on YouTube and on Zoom, our colleagues have shared the link. You will have them available, and also you can re-watch whenever you want the full webinar online on YouTube, on the UNWTO YouTube channel. It will be there available to actually see and share with anyone that you feel. So that said, thank you so much for being with us. We have almost 350 people following us both through Zoom and YouTube. And as I mentioned, we have two blocks. We've covered the first one where we've looked into the trends that we are seeing in terms of travel and where we might fit hopefully some recovery signs and accelerate those. And now we will pass into the second block, the objective of which is to share with you two monitoring tools that both UNWTO and Google have developed to share insights and hopefully to help you through your assessment of the impact of the crisis, but also to identify what we hope to see some green shoots around. So I will start to share my screen, and I do hope that you can see it. So I think everything is working fine. If someone, I think you can see my screen. So basically, what I'd like to share with you today, it's a tool that's available online on UNWTO website. And if you just Google it, because that's the best way to find information, just Google UNWTO Recovery Tracker, and I'm sure you will find it. The Recovery Tracker offers you in one place information on different indicators related to the industry, which will allow you not only to compare different indicators, because we often see a lot of information going around and we see, okay, hotel searches are growing here, airport here, transport here. So what we wanted to provide the industry is one-stop shop where you can find that information easily and the most updated possible. So what you can see in the Recovery Tracker is UNWTO data on international tourist arrivals, which has been updated up to the month of December. So it gives you an overall information of the whole year. Also information on the situation related to travel restrictions. In terms of online sentiment, how is the online information, and not only searches, we're talking about everything that people share online. How is that information in terms of travel sentiment going up or down? And unfortunately, you can see that in January, and due to the new waves that we are seeing, but also the new travel restrictions, the travel sentiment has gone down. We also have information on occupancy rates, searches of hotels, hotels, which have been stalled in the last month. Hotel bookings. Interestingly enough, also a comparison for short-term rentals. So how is the market of short-term rentals compared to hotel bookings actually performing? And it's interesting to see that it's actually doing less bad than some of the traditional accommodation options. And we also share information on seat capacity in airlines. And here again, a trend that we have seen in other areas. Domestic air capacity has been impacted 61% in the year of 2020, while international seat capacity has been much more impacted. We also have information on actual air reservations in terms of a partner that works with us. And I'd like to say here that this effort is only possible because we count on a huge number of partners, as you can see in the screen, from CSTR, Sorgen, AirDNA, ICAO, Forward Keys, TCI Research, all partners that have actually made their data available for us to have this overview. That information can be shared globally. As you can see here, you can do it by region, you can do it by sub-region. So if you want to compare your country in terms of the sub-region that you are, you can actually take a look at your own destination, but also seeing what is happening in your region that can be of interest to you. It also allows you to go into information on the main destinations around the world, so that you can have a detailed information by month. As you can see here, you can see how the different indicators have evolved and which regions are being more affected at this point. So it's actually interesting, for example, if you look at an indicator such as actual air reservations in terms of the different regions, that you see that Africa is doing relatively better, Middle East as well, which is interesting, as Eva was showing Dubai doing particularly well in the searches. And some of these indicators allow you to confirm some of the trends that you might see elsewhere. You can also compare the different indicators and have a specific idea of how they have been moving around. And as I said, for example, if you see the data up to now of short-term rentals, we have seen that they have been less affected than other types of accommodation. And again, you can also play around, as I always say, and try to identify in your region or in your sub-region and compare yourself with other areas. So as I said, the tracker is updated on a regular basis. It's available at the UNWTO website for free. Anyone that wants to use it, and is one of our objectives is to make sure that we give an overall vision of what the sector is going through in the different areas. This is information also in terms of the different destinations. We have focused on the top destinations in the world for data availability, but you can also see the same in terms of source markets. So with that said, as I mentioned, the idea is to make sure that this information is available for you. As you can see here, you can find information on how the destinations are closed, and also in terms of travel sentiment, for example, how it has evolved in terms of the main source markets. And it's very interesting to see some of the source markets in Europe, for example, Germany or the United Kingdom in 2020 going better in summer, as I mentioned before, but deteriorating very clearly towards the end of the year, and even more now in January. So with that said, this is our recovery tracker available to all of you. Our colleagues have put it on the chat, so you can have it easily accessible. And I do hope that it can be of use to you. I've seen some questions on the chat. We'll be happy to take them after the presentation by our colleague Songul from Google, who I would now give the floor to share the Destination Insights tool from Google. Songul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Hi, everyone. Merhaba in Turkish, selam in Arabic, hola in Spanish, bonjour, because there is so many people from everywhere. So I'm Songül Cengiz, the right way to say it. I work as a global tourism analytical lead in Google, and I work with data most of the time.
According to Wikipedia, international tourism.
Sorry for that. My phone is listening to me. Anyhow, today I'm going to take you through the different tools that Google made available to people, to users, so that we can make the right decisions at the right time, real time. It's a really good transition to what Eva and Sandra has presented. Basically, everybody knows Google Trends. Google Trends is a tool that Google made available 15 years ago in 2016, and you can search any topic. I actually will share my screen and will show you everything at the same time. I'm not going to talk about Google Trends. I'm going to talk about a new tool specifically for tourism sector. So Google Trends. Everybody know the interface, and you can search for any topic, anytime. And if you can see, there is topic and there is search term. If you look at rural tourism versus urban tourism, it supports everything that Eva has been showing in the past presentation. Basically, if we look at worldwide, rural tourism became much more popular and much more searched than urban tourism. However, this information is about any topic globally at any time. It's great, but we want to know more because the travel tourism, the travel sector got impacted so much that as Google, since the pandemic started, we started internally thinking about what can we make available to everyone, that they can access anytime, so real time, and that can give global overview as well. So we came up a month and a half ago with a tool called platform called Travel Insights. You just type Travel Insights by Google, sorry. And you come to this page. This platform contains actually 3 tools, not only the Destination Insights, but also the Hotel Insights and Travel Analytics Center. Today, I will not talk about the Travel Analytics Center because it's for commercial partners who have a Google account. But I will tell you something about the 2 other tools. Let's start with Destination Insights, and let me know if you cannot see my screen or if it's there is a lag. Do not hesitate to stop me. So, what does Destination Insight do? Basically, you choose any country. I will show you 2 examples today. Let's take Spain, for example, which is a less positive scenario when it comes to search. And we want to know from any country. It can be the United Kingdom, which has so many UK tourists are visiting Spain all the time. So let's start with worldwide and the type of trip, let's say domestic and international. And you can also choose air queries or accommodation queries or both. And as Eva and Sandra said, everything is so dynamic that we should look at a shorter window. Let's take January up to February. And automatically you will get day per day how is the search query volume or the demand over time for travel compared to last year. And as you can see in the scenario of Spain, from any country in the world, the travel queries are at least 50% lower or more. You can download the data from here and even look at the day over day and year over year and month over month percentages as well. When you scroll down a little bit more, you're able to see what is the demand, the domestic demand for Spain. So the most searched city when it comes to travel for air and accommodation is Madrid, and followed by Barcelona. And when you look at the demand growth by demand growth is about which city or travel queries have grown the fastest in the time period you took. And here it's Granada. Basically, it's the ski season. So domestically, people are searching for Granada or Marbella, the Costa del Sol in general. When we look at international demand, which countries are the most searching for Spain as a destination? Currently, it's Argentina, Peru, and Germany, and Spain for domestic. When you change the time frame, these percentages and this data changes as well. You are able to download everything from here as well. Let's look at the UK. You know, let's say Great Britain. United Kingdom. Yes. So if I want to know from the United Kingdom, the people who want to visit Spain, what are they looking for as destination? And we will see that they're looking for the Costa del Sol, or they're looking for, these are the growing basically, but for the demand, Magaluf, I think it's a coastal town somewhere in the north. And then they are looking for different places that are very popular resort towns in the coast of Spain. Let's look at a positive example. At the moment, there are not many countries that have, from worldwide, let's say, there are not many countries that have positive search trends. So we look at United Arab Emirates. Compared to last year, it's almost even or sometimes surpassing the queries of last year when it comes to air and accommodation for the month of January. And what cities do people look for when they search for the United Arab Emirates as a destination? Mainly Dubai, and followed by Abu Dhabi, which is the second and the capital city. And then when you are looking at domestic demand in the United Arab Emirates, the most searched city basically is Abu Dhabi, because people are based in Dubai searching to visit Abu Dhabi. Ultimately, this is the domestic demand. So the growth is bigger there. And then when you look at January, it's quite interesting to see that in the past month, after the agreement to restart political relations with Qatar suddenly became the biggest source country for United Arab Emirates. So Qataris are planning to visit the United Arab Emirates the most in this month. How does it translate for your marketing plan if you were a DMO dealing with tourism in the United Arab Emirates? You'd make sure you target your message towards the Qataris to attract them to use your services. If you were a hotel, you make sure to target Qatar with your offering, followed by Ukraine, Germany, and Hungary, basically. So this is how it could be useful to all the travel and tourism stakeholders. This was for Destination Insights. Now I'll go back to the main platform and I'll take you through Hotel Insights. Let's say you are based in Spain. Your market is Spain. You have a hotel, a small hotel, and you are in, let's say, Andalusia, the south of Spain. And you want to know what happened to hotel queries in the past year. And as you can see, 50 to 75% drop in hotel queries in the past 12 weeks for your region. And you want to know, compared to last year, day per day, how did it change? And you can download this data as well. So as you can see, it's still very, very low. you can also see if the demand is more domestic or international and how it is changing week over week. And you're able to download it as well. Thanks to this data, you're able to spot from, you know, your region. Actually, I can go here as well. You can see where your demand for accommodation and hotels in general is coming from. At the moment, it's mainly Spain, followed by the United Kingdom. So you're able to download all this data, and it's accessible to everyone, and it's real time, you know, and it's global. So you can try it out because the user interface is super friendly. And if you have any questions regarding these two tools or any comments, do not hesitate to reach out to us, basically. That's it for me. I'll be happy to take any questions regarding the two tools we presented.
Thank you very much, Songul. I think they've been impressively useful and very to the point. I think the hotel tool is amazingly specific. It allows you to really see down to the destination level, and very useful both for destination managers and for our colleagues in the industry. We have a few questions in the chat, so I'll share them. The first one was on the UNWTO recovery tracker. There was a question regarding if the comparison with the previous month took into account seasonality. Yeah, the tracker actually compares month over the same month the previous year, so that we actually have an idea of where we are compared to the same indicator in the same year. But we do also show how it has evolved compared to the previous month, but we don't do that on a quantitative way. We just show, I would say, a sign of if it's up, down, or maintaining it the same level. Not so much for comparisons, but to see if there is a shift in trend in that indicator. So if we do see that there is some positive signs, or if we're very much stalled. There's also an interesting comment I'll just share. Someone was saying Magaluf, that Songul was searching, is in Mallorca. So for everyone's reference to know. And there's another question on the chat, I think for Eva, in terms of the search queries as well, which is in terms of sustainable tourism. If you see that there is an increase in people's searches for sustainability in your research.
Again, this would vary country by country, but overall, yes, there is an occasional spike in sustainable tourism because it's a big topic recently. So we're seeing some interest on search as well.
Thank you, Eva. There's also a question in terms of the tools, maybe for Songul. One of our participants asks if there is any plans to go down to a more granular level, not only searching in country, but also at the destination level, I think specifically for the US in terms of states.
On mute. Sorry. It's a very, very valid point. So in Google, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of dashboards, but we have to go through a lot of compliance processes to be able to make that available and to sustain the tool to be you know, valid, basically. So it's a very valid point, and it came up a lot. A lot of people want to know at destination city level how their demand is changing over time. There are ways of doing it through the actual tool. Basically, if you check the domestic trends within a country as well, you're able to see how, or deduce how, one city is overtaking demand over another city. But at the moment, from the interface that we have available, we are not able to see city or state level. It's country only. But it's a very valid point.
Thank you, Songu. Thank you for that. Another question that came in the chat is, I would say, how can we support Africa in these challenging times? I think I will answer from my point of view, and then I'll pass either to Eva or to Songu. From the UNWTO side, Africa has been a priority for our Secretary General since he took office. We actually have an agenda dedicated for Africa with 10 areas of support. And one of them is training, and this is something that we have been doing already, even with Google, with some of the destinations in Africa, and that we will continue to roll out throughout the year to support that upskill in the job market that we think is critical for recovery. In many other ways, from a political point of view, our Secretary General has also traveled to many African countries, showing that it is important to revive the sector. It is important to support tourism. And obviously, we're working always with our multilaterals to find ways to support the sector in financial terms. We're working, for example, with the European Reconstruction and Development Bank in projects on the ground. On the different areas and different fronts. From Google side, Eva, I don't know if you want to add anything also on the activities that we have developed with you.
Sure. So there's an overlap between some of our activities and efforts in Africa, including the UNWTO Google Accelerator that we hosted recently. There's a program that's coming up soon as well jointly that will be rolled out in Africa first. I think in addition to that, it's important to note that Google has teams all over the world that work directly with local ministries of tourism, local tourism boards. So we do offer our support to the industry on the ground in many different ways, from upskilling tourism organizations, building their digital capability, providing insights, shaping their digital strategies, helping them promote their brands and position their brands and find the right audiences. So we do have teams available everywhere for this kind of support, and Africa is definitely a priority market in many ways for us.
Thank you very much, Eva. Another question that has been shared is about the digital passports. We have seen, obviously, there's a lot of discussions around the issue of digital passports and also digital testing information. From a UNWTO point of view, I think that the important point here is one, obviously, we're talking about certificates. I think it's, you need to be careful on talking about digital passports. We're talking about certification, actually a certificate that either you have taken a test and that test is negative, or a certificate that you have been vaccinated. But we can't talk about health passports because that cannot be a discriminatory measure to have people traveling. It is important, obviously, that we can digitalize the whole process of that information as more and more countries request travel to show the proof of a negative PCR, for example. And obviously, because all of this needs to be interoperational in terms of information, it is critical that we can work with the different parts of the industry. And there's many digital solutions to the market. I have a travel pass, AOK pass, the Common Pass by the World Economic Forum and partners. It is critical that there is coordination in terms of how the systems work, the type of data that's requested, and also that type of data is validated by the governments and by the World Health Organization, because unless we have a common base to actually define what kind of data we're asking and a way to share that data in a confidential way, in a way that the data remains with the passenger, it will be impossible to actually implement those digital tools. But it is very important to advance them, because digitalization will be key to accelerate recovery in a key way. Another question coming through the chat is, how do we use the search information and the trends into long-term marketing strategies? We've been talking about very much what is happening now, and it's a very volatile moment. But Eva, maybe I'll give the floor to you on that, how to use that information into long-term marketing strategies.
I'm very tempted to say that there are no more long-term marketing strategies. But yes, before COVID, we used to work with tourism entities precisely on long-term annual plans. And like I said in my presentation, there was a well-established cycle where, you know, we would look at trends, we would look at markets, we would examine the market strategy for a particular country. What are there any new source markets that they should be looking at? What's the stage of awareness, where in the funnel travelers are in each of the source markets. So once there's more stability and we're back to a more predictable pattern, a lot of the Google Insights can help with understanding market potentials, understanding audiences, understanding topics, because what you might need to address in one market isn't necessarily the case somewhere else, right? So Google can be very helpful in understanding those perceptions and what you need to achieve in terms of objectives, and then actually putting those marketing activities out there. But I would say for now, hold off on the longer term planning and just try to use data to get through the next couple of months, or whenever we get to a more stable area.
Thank you very much, Eva. I think that's a very valid point. I think there's an important learning from this crisis is our capacity to be flexible and to use data into feeding into our strategies. Also, looking at the longer term, when we think about the objectives of a destination, for example, is really to see how those long-term objectives, either it is to, you know, position different new destinations on the market, can be now maximized through the new trends. We were all discussing over tourism before the crisis. Now the search for rural areas, nature environments also gives us an opportunity to actually open up new experiences, open up new destinations, and hopefully consolidate them so that we take advantage of the fact that due to the restrictions, people are looking for new products and captivate them with a quality experience, with something that will stay and will make them return. So I think it's important to match those 2 points and never lose sight of what your end objective is. So I think this is very much one of the top engine. Another question coming through the chat, very interesting in terms of jobs and education. And one of our participants asks how educators should be preparing the hospitality students for post-COVID-19 jobs. I think, Eva, if you want to take that one from a big technological player perspective, and then I'll add some suggestions.
I think for anyone in any type of education currently, it's very important that people understand that whatever education they get, they will have to build on that, and they're not done once they leave school. So that lifelong learning, I think, will be more critical than ever. Again, as I pointed out, I think that for tourism, for hospitality, a lot of the future is digital. A lot of how people will be experiencing the industry at various stages of their journey will be digital. So I would say put emphasis there. I come from hospitality myself, and I know that marketing and digital weren't necessarily top of mind for everyone. It's a very operational industry. So I think upskilling people digitally will be critical in any role and whatever job they have in the industry. We do have, as Google, a number of free tools that are publicly available on digital learning platforms. So I'd say, in addition to the industry knowledge, make sure that all of your people are digitally literate at least.
Thank you. I think one of the key points is, and we've looked into it, is data literacy. I think within the technological world, we will see a bigger need of people working also with data, understanding data, and bringing up the value of data to our sector. This crisis has shown that how data can be important. And I think also we were talking about the capacity to be flexible, so to work with different sectors. I think the tourism is probably one of the sectors that touches more sectors of society. So we need to be capable of thinking beyond our sector. We're just talking during the crisis now, and I think it accelerated something we saw already before. It's a lifestyle industry. So if the trend in lifestyle is food, then tourism will benefit and improve with that. If it's wellness, then tourism will need to adapt to that and offer. So we need to be able to work with partners outside the tourism sector, either their technological partners, either their health partners, which is now critical, either their innovation, either they're from the gastronomy world, either they're from a totally different world. I think this is one of the challenges that we'll have to go, is thinking, how does our industry fit into the trends of society and adapt it. So I think that education into understanding beyond the sector will be critical as well. So we have another question also in the chat, which is, how does your data show the future travelers will be more digital when traveling abroad? I think, Eva, one of your charts had some information on the digital. I don't know if you want to go into that.
Yeah, that particular one was actually from a non-Google source. So from a company that did research and study on this. But I think even before COVID, we saw that year over year, the share of digital bookings for travel, the share of Google searches for travel, all of this was on the rise, right? So we saw that clear trajectory for years before COVID. Now the entire industry is down, obviously, so it's hard to predict exact numbers. But I think it's clear that COVID changed a lot of habits more towards the digital industry, and so people are getting used to doing more things online simply because there's no other way for them to do that. And I think the point there is that travel and tourism industry will need to evolve even more in this area. And I don't just mean travel bookings, but actually the entire traveler journey, leveraging whatever technology is available to make that journey more rich, more smooth, more speedy. I think that will be critical. But that's definitely a trend that we were seeing before COVID. As I said, whether you look at travel bookings, whether you look at Google searches, the industry, a lot of the industry was moving online. Again, this isn't to say that offline doesn't have its role to play. I think it's just on every one of us to think about how technology can complement and enhance whatever we're doing.
Thank you very much. I think Songol was sharing some information in the chat. Songol, I don't know if you want to add anything to what Eva just mentioned.
Eva gave an absolutely full answer. I just wanted to give the reference for people who want to look it up. Basically, surveys, as you mentioned rightly, Sandra, surveys are what people claim they believe they will do. Google searches are the intent of the people. So users are searching things because they have an intention, and it can be one way of looking at data. But then surveys are what they claim they would be doing. So there is a differentiation to make. Some stakeholders might find the information from surveys not entirely complete if it's not with the intent as well, if it does not match the intent as well. So it's great to have access to both perspectives to give a full image of the situation.
Thank you, Songul. I think that's a very important point, that the current situation demands us to have whole data insights available and comparing them as well. Because as you say, the searches are the actual behavior. Often in surveys, we tend to put ourselves in a better light, if I may. I also there's an interesting question, and I think that will probably be the last one we will take. We're approaching our time, and it's on how to create powerful content for online. Key points, Eva.
So I think partially I've touched on this with the video and YouTube question earlier. I think some basic truths about content still stand, whether it's online or offline, right? Like knowing the audience, knowing what they're interested in hearing, and having a strong story, being able to link your brand to your audience and what they're looking for. Now, for online specifically, I think each platform has certain rules and specificities and tips for optimizing your content. So I think that's best researched platform by platform, and even on a single platform like YouTube. Depending on your objectives, you could create many different versions and types of content, right? So to some, YouTube may seem like this big video platform, but there are a lot of nuances, and there are a lot of different types of video content and video promotion within that, depending on what the objectives are. So I would say define your objectives, know what you're trying to achieve, and then research and get support from agencies and partners in how each of the platforms can meet your objectives. But again, there is no substitute for having a story. I'm a big believer in that. So knowing what you're trying to accomplish, who the audience is, and what your brand stands for, I think those are still fundamentally important. And then you tweak them for each platform and each objective.
Thank you, Eva. So content is still king. Definitely, we should keep that in mind in today's so busy world of information. With that, I've just I will share a comment that is on the chat, which is we'll not dwell into it, but I think it's worthwhile sharing. There was a question if the United Kingdom information on the tool would be able to be broken down through the different Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. I think Songul already answered that in a broader scope, but I do leave the note, which is important. It would be important to have that available. With that said, I would just like to remind all our participants and viewers that the presentations will be available at the UNWTO website. So very happy for you to use them, spread them, share them, and that the YouTube video of this webinar will be available also on our platform. to be viewed afterwards. From my side at UNWTO, I'd like to thank our colleagues from the UNWTO Academy, which are not visible but made this possible, Tihana and Arlene, and also the team at headquarters, Anna and Laura, who have been coordinating us and making sure that we were all together this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, wherever you are. Finally, thank you very, very much to Eve and Songbul for sharing your knowledge and time. I'm sure that unfortunately circumstances will allow us to repeat this experience further, and we do hope to come back hopefully in some months with other trends where we will start seeing the curve going up as vaccinations is rolled out around the countries. Travel is part of the DNA of all of us, and I do trust that very soon we will be able to return to the road wherever we want to travel next. So with that said, thank you so much and hope to see you soon.
Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure. Take care.